Hello, thank you so much. Once again, as always, I want to dedicate this to the neshama, the elevation of the neshama of the soul of Dr. Zelenko, his neshama have an aliyah. Lori, I was talking to a friend of mine about education and specifically Jewish education, where people send their kids to, if like Jews who live in America, like specifically Orthodox Jews, or not even not Orthodox Jews, at the risk of doing what's called, what Frank accuses me of, we have a name for it, it's called farrakhaning. And I wish this wasn't the case. Unfortunately, we see what we see now with public schools and this whole, I guess, grooming and trans agenda. We're starting to see on an ideological level, if not actionable level, we're starting to even see it in some of these, what I would like to call, and I'm going to use in quotes, modern Orthodox day schools, primarily in New York. I'm not going to name them, but it's happening to the point where people are now wondering where are we supposed to send our kids. But here's the thing, like you're talking about a state like New York and New Jersey, right? So people send their kids to day schools, but they are, they have to pay through the nose for these day schools. On top of that, they have to pay property taxes to the state where they're not sending their kids to the public schools, which property taxes are funding. And they don't get vouchers. So like, for example, a state like Florida, they're talking about vouchers for, give people vouchers for these kind of things. How many states in the union have this voucher program? And are there other states besides Florida that are working to get, if they don't have yet?
Great question. And I will tell you, because this is an area that our team is researching right now. We've been involved, for those of you on the call that aren't familiar with the work that we've done at PJTN. Our work started a decade ago in education when we found an anti-Semitic Pearson published textbook in one of our classrooms. And we found out about it because an evangelical Christian kid who was starting his first year in high school in the government school system. Very important to use the term government. It's not public education, it's government instructed education. And unfortunately, that anti-Semitic quote, anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian, the values our nation was founded upon. We're now teaching the garbage that we found a decade ago. It's getting worse, as we all know, but now we're finding that the whole wokeism has now infiltrated Jewish day schools, parochial Catholic schools, Protestant Christian schools. And it shouldn't be a surprise. The only safe place for our children now is in the home. We are going to have to pull our kids out of the system, because if we want to be able to maintain what we're fighting for, we are going to have to hand this over to the next generation. Right now, this next generation is so woke. Fortunately, thank God, the work started in Tennessee. It went to Florida. I met with Governor DeSantis because the books we found in Tennessee that were being used to indoctrinate our children with propaganda were also being used in Florida, primarily Pearson publishers, now known as Savas. And I'll just make an aside note. The reason why they had to change their name to Savas is because we have been hammering them publicly through press releases, through media statements that I've made, through interviews on camera about Pearson, exposing their shareholders, their 4 largest shareholders, who are the Islamist governments of Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Libya. And so we wonder why we've got this garbage in the schools that are anti-American and anti-Israel. Well, need I remind us who the great Satan and the little Satan is, who the pigs and the apes are? Our enemy knows who we are. So what have they done? They've infiltrated the classroom by going in through the textbooks. So we figured out what their little game plan was. Unfortunately, our religious schools and even our charter schools have adopted this wokeism curriculum, because if you want to be certified, if you want to receive the accreditation, you got certain standards to meet. And so again, it goes back to get your kids and your grandkids out of the government education system and teach them. There's plenty of great information online, great original source information to teach our children while it can still be found. We should be buying up and devouring up books and storing them in our home. And I'm talking about history books, books that talk about events that were documented in history that actually took place, like what happened with the Holocaust. We're looking at even Holocaust education is being revised. We're dealing with Holocaust revisionism now. They're trying to water down the memory of 6 million Jews who were murdered because they want to teach the Holocaust is just another genocide. No, it wasn't just another genocide. This anti-Semitism, this hatred, Jew hatred, has been around for many, it goes all the way back to Egypt. When Pharaoh, when they said that there's a people among us, when he said there's a people among us who are not like us, it started back then. And then we saw it with Haman, we saw it with the pogroms, we saw it with the Inquisition, we see it with the Holocaust, and now we're doing it now. You know, Mengele, the spirit of Mengele is still alive and well. And you know, I watched that the Nuremberg trials. You know, for me personally, I'm glad that they did it, but it was a farce. Because where were the 1,600 Nazis that we brought over here to the United States of America because we wanted everything that they had? We should have taken the information from them and then they should have been hung. But no, we, the taxpayers of America, helped to replant these people, give them new names, identities, give them homes.
Lovely neighborhoods in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah, Von Braun. Yeah. So, you know, I spoke to a group last night in Seminole County because you all know that what we're doing now as an organization is we're going county by county, state by state to shake people out of their slumber. And there was about 75 people there last night, which I was really encouraged because I've spoken to this group several times, and there were a lot of new faces, and it inspired me. And I said to them, as I'm saying to all of you right now, we do not have the luxury of sitting back and sitting this battle out. We are all there is left. The patriots who are willing, God-fearers, who are willing to defend the land that God gave to us. We've squandered, and you know, our generation is guilty. And I asked the group last night, what will the history books write about our generation? That we were too lazy, too fat and happy to get up and do anything because we just wanted to be left alone. Just let us live in peace. Well, you know what? The peace is not coming to our doorstep. There's a verse that the organization PJTN, Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, is named after the book of Yael. Proclaim this to the nations, prepare for war. That's what we're getting ready to face because the Nazis never went away. Like I said, we gave them a place to live here in America. What did that say about our character? Our US State Department, the swamp. And look at what we just, Biden just threw us a bone with publicly saying, oh, America, when we define anti-Semitism, we're going to use the IRA definition because that's the one we like. But we think the Nexus version has a place too. No, you know what the Nexus version does? It enables the Jew haters like J Street and other organizations who want to destroy Israel. They want to confuse the narrative of what's going on. We have the ADL, the largest distributor of woke curriculum, CRT, anti-Semitic CRT, ethnic studies, anti-Semitic ethnic studies model curriculum. We've got a lot of work to do. And, you know, I covet all of your prayers, because what happens in America happens to Israel. We know that we are joined, excuse me, at the hip. The lost tribes are residing, and Judah are residing in the United States of America. And we were told that our nations would unite together in the book of Isaiah. In the last days, we would unite together against the enemies of Israel. And look at what's happening. But unfortunately, there's still too many people who are asleep. I just got a message this morning. Somebody sent me a statement. You all may have heard of this. I don't know if any of you know who John Guandolo is. He was one of the attorneys that came and testified back in 2010 when we were trying to block the 52,000 square foot Islamic facility that they were trying to build just 30 miles from Franklin for a congregation of 25 people. And when we did the research, when I started researching the board members of that 1,500 square foot facility with only 25 members, 2 of the members were tied to Hamas. They were members of Hamas. One of those members was actively recruiting Muslims to kill Jews to free Palestine on his MySpace page. We have all the documentation. And so we brought in John Guandolo to come and testify about the threat. And I just get this message this morning, got some bad news this morning. John Guandolo's group was shut down today. Apparently the jihadi and communist attacks were too overwhelming for them to continue. It is a very big loss. I wanted you both to see his analysis of the capture of the evangelical community in the featured article below. So a portion of that featured article consists of the report Guandolo's team did on violence across America from the transvengeance movement, which is on the rise. The organization, Guandolo's organization, assesses a strong possibility of large-scale violence in the United States and possibly Europe, likely in the window after Memorial Day weekend. The FBI is now investigating involuntary, celibate, violent extremism. And this is based on internal FBI documents. They're concerned about the FBI now targeting Christian churches. And then here's the list of evangelical Christian leaders who are helping the Muslim Brotherhood. Nationally known pastor Jack Hibbs, very well known, is his work with advancing the work of a Muslim Brotherhood operative. Rick Warren, his work with the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood's ISNA, Islamic Society of North America group, another arm of Hamas. Josh McDowell, Sharia love efforts. I mean, and it goes on, the World Evangelical Association and their support for international jihadi information operations. The National Association of Evangelicals, the chairman of the board, Jenkins, hosts the leader of the global jihadi movement's key line of operation, interfaith outreach. It's just like what happened with Hitler. He also worked with the jihadis and they embraced what he was doing. We are repeating the mistakes of the past. Please forgive my frustration today. But when I read this, I thought, when are we going to be next? We have been hit so hard financially this year. We have been shadow banned. Our website has been taken over by a Palestinian group. We had to shut that down and reboot. I got a guy he's an Arab guy, somehow is able to keep signing on to my social media to try to act like me and publish stuff. So, and we're getting ready to expose this jihadi Islamist woman who was just appointed, because one of the things I didn't mention, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I was appointed by a school board member in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, to serve on the district advisory council. Well, a new school board member, his last name is Tolson or Tolness, he appointed this jihadi who is a supporter of the Muslim Student Association, Muslim Brotherhood. And so we're calling for her removal. I'm reaching out to other organizations in Florida to ask them to sign on to join me to demand that she be removed. We do not need anti-Semites and jihadi supporters involved in any school or any government position for that matter. So we've got a battle on our hands, and the only way we're going to fight the battle is we're going to have to fight it locally, county by county, state by state. And it requires those of us who are in the United States to engage. Silence in the face of evil, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, is evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. In fact, not to speak is to speak. You know, South Africa, the church in South Africa allowed for the birth of the BDS movement in Durban. Not one Christian leader at the time challenged the lie that Israel was an apartheid state that came out of there. All the anti-Semitism that we're watching unfold today can be tied right back to Durban and BDS, because the whole nexus definition is their ability to communicate their false narrative that Israel is an apartheid state and it go unchallenged. And when I was in South Africa in 2019, and I spoke in 3 cities, meeting with pastors mostly, asking them, where were you? Why didn't you speak up? You knew that wasn't true. You're South Africans. You know what apartheid is. You also know Israel is not an apartheid state. How could you be silent about that? Because just by your silence, you're telling the rest of the Christian world around the world that it's true. You should have spoken up. You're in violation of the 9th commandment, falsely accusing your brother of something he's not doing. So anyhow.
Frank, do you have
I have something, it's a frustration because I feel like I have a good idea, but again, no money, no support, you can't make it happen. But if somebody was inclined to take this, I'd be glad if they took it from me. Laura, you're familiar with like kosher certification? Like we have these organizations which hopefully they actually do their job and make sure that products are kosher. And I'm sure that they do. I'm just saying that we rely heavily on them for something very important, something, there should be a certification with the same exact model, except for that works directly with like community, sometimes perhaps even like several different like parts of a community, which examines the kosherness of the education, of the books, of whatever the teachers are saying to the children. Meaning, like, there could be an organization, right, which again, there's a problem. There's already a minor flaw. Nothing's perfect. Is that, you know, if this is if this works successfully and people become too overly reliant, and then it just becomes another institution that can be corrupted because nobody's paying attention. But at least initially, there could be an organization which goes directly to community, and it bypasses, you know, even local politicians, and goes directly to, you know, calls for meetings for just directly, you know, the meetings can be held at people's homes, you know, people who are concerned. And that way, you know, at least people can have a basic understanding of what their children are being taught. And this is probably something that should have been done already a long time ago. I don't know if it's like too late for it, for something like this, even if it's, you know, even if it existed. But regardless, there's going to be, like, unless everybody is homeschooling, right, which would be ideal. But even the people who are homeschooling, they still use materials, you know, they still get their educational supplies and their books, their ideas, even if it's websites from others. Not every family is going to create its own curriculum, right? So there's always going to be a need for, like, a professional effort to, you know, and I'm borrowing the term kosher, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean like,
Right.
you know, only Jewish stuff, but basically, what does it mean specifically? It means it's an organization which investigates if there's any wokeness found, if you know, because that's a Gnostic religion.
Right.
That's literally a Gnostic Marxist, which Marxism itself is a Gnostic religion, right? So that's what people don't understand, is that their children are being indoctrinated into a religion. That's not metaphorical. A lot of people think when you say, oh, the left, you know, they're a cult, and they think it's a metaphor. Folks, it's not a metaphor. They're literally a cult with their own religion, their own belief system, their own views on God, everything. Total alternative to, they're not atheists, okay? They're not atheists. So if there was like an organization, like a kosher certification, you know, or, you know, however you want to call it, like, just, you could call it the Inquisition.
Yeah.
I'd love that, you know, like.
Let me help you out there, because that's what PJTN does. And we didn't start out to do that. It fell into our lap because we saw the bureaucracy within the education system. And fortunately for Tennessee and for Florida, where all of the work that we've done has been birthed, we saw the need to get people involved. If parents and tax-paying citizens would engage in the process, because number one, the parents have a vested interest, because yes, they're paying taxes, but more importantly, it's their children that are being indoctrinated. Taxpayers are investing in these government schools, hoping that the next generation of kids are going to come out of the system, and they're going to be good Americans, and they're going to, you know, be patriots. So those are the local shareholders. They're the ones that are stakeholders. They're the ones who have a vested interest in what is being taught. So what we did when we saw the first book, that Pearson book that had the anti-Semitic quote, I had to read that book cover to cover. And then I realized there's more books that we have to look at. So I had to recruit people from the community, volunteers. So now we've created the system so that, you know, when the bureaucrats in the education system try to push their agenda, it gets exposed to us by our reviewing the curriculum being used on the local level. And that can be done. You do it through your local county school board and your child's school. But we had to take it a step further, because the problem has always been the content, the content in the textbooks and the instructional materials. And so we had to take it a step further. If we could get it at the very beginning, at its inception, and that's what happened in Florida. And that's why this whole thing mushroomed, because when we brought Governor DeSantis the evidence in the books and the instructional materials, he committed at that time as congressman that if he won his race for governor in Florida, then he would remove the textbooks, he'd get rid of Common Core. So we were able, he called for an emergency review of civic standards. The standards are the most important aspect of education because the standards are adopted by law, they're passed, the legislature, remember the House and the Senate represent us, we the people. So we should be communicating with our elected officials when they're doing this, letting them know we want to make sure we've got good civics, we've got good social studies, the information is accurate. But when the Department of Education pulled together a group of organizations to help draft the civic standards, PJTM was invited to be to play a role in that process. And that's when we were able to incorporate right into the standards that it is required in Florida, 1.8 million kids every year starting this fall are going to learn about the role the Hebrew Bible played in the founding and with the drafting of the documents and our form and structure of government. That's now required. So once the standards were adopted, then those standards are sent to the publishing houses that are want to pitch their textbooks and their instructional materials. Well, if those publishers want to do business with the state of Florida, they must comply. So what happens is they put their version of textbooks together that they say are in compliance with the standards that were submitted to them. And then it is the duty of the school or the Department of Education and people like us, organizations that the DOE works with, because they can't do it all. We're doing it completely volunteer. Of course, everything, our organization is a nonprofit. So we do what we do because people donate and financially support our efforts. But we were able to look at those books to see if they're in compliance. It is my understanding, I think 60-something% of the books that were submitted initially for civics and social studies in Florida were thrown out because they didn't comply. And one of the books had in there a question for the student. What social justice causes can you find in the Hebrew Bible? Well, the Department of Education threw it back to them and said, no, that's not what the standards say. What role did the government, or what role did the Hebrew Bible play in the founding of our country? What principles are found in the Hebrew Bible that are symbolic of the principles in America? That's what they made them put back in there. So if you have a gatekeeping organization, so this is not, I share all this because it's so big and it's 50 states. And that's why what we're doing is trying to organize people in all the 50 states to fight this battle, to take a personal interest, to volunteer, to review this. It's, it took us a long time to get here. We're not gonna get out of this overnight. We have to be as vigilant as they have been. We didn't know. We assumed that our children were in good hands in the public school system. We never could have imagined that our school boards would be against us. So to answer your question, there is an organization, and there are other organizations that we work with that have sprouted up that are doing this in their local districts. But again, it comes back to, we have to take ownership of this. We can't just, because our taxes are paying for these departments of education and their employees, we can't just assume that they're going to, do what we want them to do. So now, as a result of the model that we created in the state of Florida, we're taking that model to other states like Tennessee. I was just appointed, as Lowell said in the intro, just appointed to serve on that Civics and Social Studies Standards Committee. And we will be taking what we did in Florida and we will be putting them into the standards in the state of Tennessee. And God willing, Ohio will be next. Texas will be after that. Arizona will follow that. But we're only we're limited as to how much we can do based on the resources, the financial resources that we have, because we've got to go again to these specific states. I'm actually going back to Ohio in July because we've mobilized their community. Now they're getting engaged, and their goal is to flip their school boards, review the textbooks, look at the instructional materials, get the standards adopted. Virginia, the Department of Education contacted us, asked us, would you look at our civic standards? We want to have the gold standard. Well, of course, we reviewed them and we made some recommendations as to what needs to change in order to make them the gold standards. So we're waiting to hear back from them to see if they're interested in allowing us to make those changes for them.
Lori, I have a question. Recently, you know, we see people, parents going up in front of school boards, and we see these very, very nice speeches. Recently, I actually saw one from a Russian-speaking person, I guess Russian-speaking Jew, who came to America in the early 90s, late 80s. I think this was in California. She got up in front of some kind of school board, and they're saying all the right things, the people that get up in front of the school boards. From what we can tell, you know, as we say in Russian, there's no one to talk to, right? The school board members are sitting there and looking at this person as if they have 7 heads. I don't even think they're listening. They're talking to each other. So now the question, it seems to me either we replace the school boards, or I don't know what. I mean, is there a way to replace these people, or we just tell them, hey, if it was me talking to these people, I wouldn't even make any arguments. I wouldn't even tell them about the Soviet Union. I wouldn't tell them about anything. I would just say, guys, I pay your salary. And if things don't change, we're going to stop paying your salary. What does that mean? No taxation without representation. We're just going to stop paying property tax. Now you could say, well, okay, good luck in prison. But here's the thing. I mean, again, this particular portion of our taxes goes directly to them. It's not like we're just paying, we're refusing to pay taxes because we don't want to be, good citizens. There's a service, especially if you're a person who's not even using that service. Like, again, you're sending your kids to day school, but even if you're not, you don't like the services being provided. And the people that are providing the service aren't listening to you. So either we change the people who are listening to us, we change the board. I don't even know how to do that. Or we just stop paying them. What are the options?
Let me tell you what we did to change the board, because that's exactly what has to happen. If they don't want to listen to us, then we need to remove them. And when we found that Pearson book a decade ago with the anti-Semitic quote, we went through the proper protocol to try to remove the book as was in policy for the county. We went by the book. They voted one night at a school board meeting. We packed the house. They voted to keep the textbook. When I got up to speak to voice my opposition, I told them, this is an election year. If you do not remove this textbook from our children's schools, you've heard from the citizens, we've said, get it out. If you don't remove this book, we're gonna remove every one of you. Well, that night, like I said, they voted to keep it. And the next morning, I mobilized the forces and we went to work. We had 4 months, election day, for the school board. We had 4 months to reverse the course, to get rid of these people. And guess what? Come that election day, those 6 school board members that were up for re-election, we brought all 6 down in one election cycle. It scared the bejeebers out of the Republicans, because Williamson County is a Republican conservative county. It scared the bejeebers out of them because it had never happened before. Nowhere had all 6 school board or all the school board members that were up for re-election be removed in one election. But it was because the parents had had enough. They slapped us in the face. We pulled their chain and removed them.
Lori, before you move on,
position.
Before you move on from that sentiment, I just want to comment. So, I'm always thinking, like, how to metaphorically speaking, ignite a flash fire. I know that's not a term, but it is a term. I just invented it. A flash fire, okay, among lazy, apathetic people. who are not looking for extra things. They're trying not to notice problems so as to avoid confrontation. Even those people have a limit, and I'm describing most people, and I'm not excluding myself. Okay, so part of this like idea of this like kosher certification, right, would involve probably for the most part something like a Project Veritas type effort in classrooms specifically. Here's why I'm saying. When I was working on construction sites, I was doing this apprenticeship, which this is before I understood what unions were. It was, you know, a union sponsored electrical apprenticeship. And I was working on construction sites, and they had union representatives on each work site who was, you know, they're supposedly working there. They're not doing much. They're just kind of like walking around, making sure nobody says anything against union interests. They literally have a guy, you know, just listening to people's conversations. It's like the KGB. It's crazy. It's really, it's insane. Anyway, so because they understand how important ideas are, that's why they literally make sure that there's a union rep there that's listening to the scuttlebutt to see if there's any, you know, right? It's unbelievable. I was just like, it was very disturbing, but it's effective because I've seen cases where they just neutralized issues before they began. You know, they got rid of guys who said something they didn't like or whatever, you know, it's unbelievable. Anyway, so if there was something directly in the classrooms like that, and I don't know what, you know, like a nanobot camera. I'm using a little bit of hyperbole right now, or, you know, a kid with a camera, you know, some parent puts a button. The point is that if we have access into the classroom on a daily level, where parents can hear what the fruitcake teacher is jamming into their kids' heads, or, you know,
Right.
It's much easier now because we have teachers telling kids, listen, if you're a girl and you want to become a boy, if you're a boy, if you want to become a girl and you want to cut your genitals off and begin transition, you can tell me, we can get you started. Your parents don't have to know, we'll protect you. If this gets out, like if you hear the teacher, if you have recordings in your locality, like, you know, the teacher, you know, the school, you know who said what, right? And you let the parents hear it in locally, not on a national. No one's going to respond to something. If I'm in Florida and this happened in Timbuktu, I'm not going to get off my ass. But if it happened in my district at my child's school, you're going to have pitchforks and torches in no time. That's going to make a difference. So I don't know how to go about doing that, but somehow to get a real-time feed into these classrooms.
There's talk about putting cameras in the classroom and miking the teacher, so that when the teacher is in that classroom with the students, people can hear, moms, dads, they can tune in and listen to what actually is going on. You know, the silver lining of COVID, we all know, was once the kids were in their virtual classrooms, parents were able to hear what their kids were being taught, and they were hearing the conversations with the classmates. And that's what lit this whole thing up. I mean, up until COVID, we had been traveling across the country, meeting with people on the local level, we had to show people what was in the books. But when they started hearing at their children in their virtual classrooms, then that's when all of this broke loose. So it's a great model to have. But you know, who's going to be the first school district to do it, or state that will pass a law requiring that teachers be monitored in the classroom for the protection of the children?
Never going to happen. That's why it has to be from the people itself. It has to be, you know, hidden camera. One of the kids, you know, their trapper keeper, you know, technology has advanced, you know, there's ways to do this. You know what I mean? Like
even kids who have just cell phone, just turn on your audio record. I mean, if you want to do video, you can do video, but just turn at the very least get audio. You know whose voice this is. You know what class that, you know what the
Yeah.
timestamp. You know what class you're in. It's not difficult to prove who this was. I mean, this
It's not,
has
it's
to
not
be-
difficult.
No.
It's there's a way to get a listening device or some kind of, yeah, I mean, primarily a listening device, because you want to hear the words that are being spoken to your children, right? And that will terrify parents to such an extent that they'll just immediately take their children out of school. Like, you'll see overnight collapses.
Mhm.
You'll
Yeah.
see a panic and a fear from the government, you know, institutions about this, that you're going to see some real change. All you got to do is access the emotions. And this is a secret that they've used against us for
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of years. Access the emotions of people to get what you want to happen. Okay, so we can use it too. Access the emotions of parents whose children are being violated.
Right, yeah.
Can I just say one thing about homeschooling? Just kind of a story from my own personal life. Like, I remember we came to the States. You know, my parents are both like, they majored in applied math. They have masters in applied math. You know, this is like, we're talking about the Soviet Union. You could say whatever you want about the Soviet Union, but you can't, you know, the education system was tip top.
Yeah.
Math and science, STEM was top. So I remember I was like in advanced math, granted, but you know, I remember distinctly coming home, talking about like the 4th or 5th grade, you know, needed help with fractions. And my parents were like, "You still doing fractions?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "We did this in 2nd grade, fractions." And I'm like, and so every year I would bring home like some kind of math, whatever it was, and they would talk to me as if I'm the one that created the curriculum. Like, I'm like, "Guys, you have a problem? Go to the school and tell them that we are 2 years behind in math." And the funny part is that like I talked to a friend of mine in my shul, in my synagogue, who's he decided to homeschool his kids. And I asked him, like, "So where do you talk about curriculum, right? So where do you get the curriculum from? Where do you pull this stuff from?" And he told me all these different sources. They have different companies that help parents formulate curriculums, especially in math. He tells me that his kids are about, I think his son is 12 or 13, and his daughter is about 11. And these kids are doing like quadratic equations. They're doing stuff that people are doing in like 7th, actually not 7th, I'm sorry, in like 11th or 12th grade. They're doing stuff that they're on the, let's say, 8th grade or 7th grade level or 6th grade level, doing stuff that people are doing on the 10th grade or 11th grade level.
Right.
And I'm like,
Right.
but the thing is, that's amazing. But here's the thing, like, and I wanted to mention this, like, even parents from my community, the Russian Jewish community, ironically, as much as they're against everything that's happening in the schools, as much as they want everything to be on a higher level, as much as they complain, you know, we come from a country where we weren't taught how to operate in the bureaucratic system, meaning we were overlorded by the bureaucratic system. But as far as going and being active and going on boards, going to PTA, going to all this, it's almost like they've outsourced the stuff. You know, they just want
Right.
things to happen. Or, you know, maybe their kid will get into some magnet school where they are teaching on a higher level, but not everybody goes to these magnet schools. Not everybody goes to Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, you know, or Bergen Academy like my sister went to. Most kids are going to public school, and what are they learning? You know, the kids like kids from my community are sleeping through math because, again, they're doing extracurricular activities and they are ahead of everybody, all the other kids. My sister slept through math, you know. So there's this kind of outsourcing. So I don't know that all the parents, and I'm talking about now all the parents, not just my community, are going to go and formulate curriculums for their kids. This is not easy. You know, you have work, you're taking the time out. They know these people that are doing this, they know that like people are using schools as daycare, glorified
Yeah.
daycare. They know that it's not like parents want to actually take care of their kids and make sure their kids are learning the right things. So
Yeah, but parents don't realize the cost of that. There's a comment here from Cynthia, and she says, "I'm very sad for Frank. He isn't aware how long people have tried to be involved, and there's a reason homeschooling started." So my ideal is homeschooling, and part of the rationale for my idea of like getting parents to hear what their children are being taught is to ultimately not fix this unfixable school system, but to annihilate it and to lead parents to the inevitable conclusion that they have to save their children and pull them away from these freaks. And the only way to do that is to scare the hell out of the parents by letting them hear what's going on. So I think Cynthia was worried that I'm trying to promote the fixing of this doomed system. And I'm certainly not. So the whole point of this is to finally make people understand, listen, daycare, like, you know, I love watching Days of Our Lives. I don't know if that's still on. And I love having my, you know, my afternoon cap. Okay. But it's not, you know, if this is what's going to happen to my kids, if they're going to demand, you know, to transition and to, you know, irreparably, you know, I mean, that's what it's leading to. I mean, so that's my point. Okay. We have to scare the hell out of the parents so that they finally smash the whole system. End of story. That's my point. So please continue.
Yep.
Sorry.
Absolutely. I think we can start by each of the states cutting ties with the federal Department of Education and educating their children on their own. Again, it requires the parents and citizens to engage their state legislature and tell them, look, what has the federal government's Department of Education done for us? Our kids, their programs that we keep implementing haven't succeeded. So, I mean, the reality is very few people are going to homeschool their kids. This we know. The second option is putting our children in these parochial schools or charter schools or religious schools, hoping that they're going to do a far better job than the government school system. You know, it comes back down to, you know, who are we as a nation? Who are we as people? Who are we as individuals? And is this really what we will tolerate? To me, it's shameful. It's absolutely it's appalling. And that's why, you know, last night when I addressed this crowd, I said to them, you know, we lost D-Day. You know, we lost how many men and women over the years who fought to fight for our freedom. And what have we done with the blood and the treasure that they buried?
Yeah.
It's shameful. I mean, it's like spitting on their graves. We should be ashamed of ourselves as a people. That people would go to war and fight on our behalf to keep so that our babies, our children can sleep in their beds at night and be safe. And we're too busy and we're not willing to make the sacrifices. You know, go find a job that'll let you work from home so you can homeschool your kids. That's how I did it. I was able to homeschool 5 of my kids. And I ran my business in the organization. I ran an international organization out of my home. Yeah. Did I have 6 a.m. to midnight days? You better believe it.
Lori, can I ask you a question? This is like a silly question. More
Yeah,
on a lighter note, maybe. Every time I see videos of kids in school today, and again, I'm gonna for sure sound like an old fogey, but I don't really care. They're sitting there and they're all wearing like pajamas in high school. College kids, they're interviewed, man on the street, they're wearing pajamas. I remember like even like 10 years ago, or like when Frank and I were in high school, like listen, we didn't have uniforms, but we wore like our jeans. Everybody wanted to show like their digs, like their new digs, or like I remember in Brooklyn, our new kicks, our new sneakers, you know, like our new Jordans. These kids are in pajamas. Can you explain this to me? I don't understand.
They dress like slobs
It's a
because we
shopper
don't
society.
we don't expect anything different. I mean, I travel a lot. And when I go get on a plane, I'm, you know, dressed respectfully and, you know, and I get on the plane with people that are in their pajamas and slippers. I look at them and these are adults.
Yeah.
That are dressed this way.
I mean, I don't dress my best on the plane either. I mean, I just dress jeans and like a shirt that I plan on kind of like washing. Cause again, a plane to me, you know, I'm there for 10 hours. Let's say I'm flying to Israel, but like, I don't know, you're in school. It's just kind of like, again, I'm not even talking about uniforms. I mean, Soviet Union had uniforms and all these parochial schools uniforms. They want to make everybody the same, but like, just
We don't teach our
there's no-
children
Wait a
self-respect.
minute, wait a minute. Don't, hold on a second. It just occurred to me. Don't challenge this. You know why? Because I just came up with a brilliant idea.
okay.
Don't make it more adult. Don't try to make it less adult. They should have teddy bears with them too.
Oh, sure.
Now listen why. Listen why. Now you can
And
get
pacifiers.
your camera through the teddy bear. Do you understand? Like, you could have teddy bears. No, I'm just
Now,
saying that we have
that's
to
an
use
idea.
what is there now, right? To start to start the fire. Okay.
Yeah. for sure.
Now seriously, like, I'm pretty sure that that's the only way that this is.
Let
gonna
let them
change.
bring PlayStation. Let them bring.
No, no,
let them
no,
bring
what I'm
their-
saying is, I'm
their
saying that,
props.
like, you know, having a constant feed into every classroom, right? I think is the only way this is gonna happen, because parents aren't gonna do a damn thing. Also, if you change the textbooks, you're gonna still have, like, you know, the teacher with 7,000, you know, it looks like they got hit in the face with a tackle box, you know, just like rings all over their faces, okay? And, you know, and they're gonna tell the kids, this textbook is stupid, you know, here's the real thing, you know what I mean? Because they know how to attach to children's emotions. Like, that's what these people are. It's like they're these like emotion sucking demons. Okay. So there has to be some kind of effort. Like, I know this is the right idea. I know that you have to get a feed, at least an audio feed, into every classroom for there to actually be a difference, for this to,
Yeah.
you know, talk about D-Day, right? You want to talk about D-Day? This is D-Day, to finally get a feed into every single classroom locally.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you could probably find some high school kids that would be willing to do that, who are bucking the system, who do not agree with what's happening, and has a teacher. I mean, if we could get a mic in the classroom, that would work. It would be shock and awe to hear some of the stuff that these teachers are teaching. And the lack of respect. I remember walking through, because when we homeschooled our kids, we did it through middle school, and then in high school, we put them into the government school. Only one of them, the others went to private schools. But he wanted to go because the ROTC program. And I remember walking through the building and looked into the art class, and on the wall was Che Guevara. And there were no students in the classroom. The door was open. The teacher, I could see on my periphery, was sitting at her desk at the front of the class. And I loudly said, as my son and I are walking through the halls of the high school, I stopped him. And I loudly said, so the teacher could hear me, "What the heck is that?" And Sean looks at me like, "What?" I said, "Che Guevara up on the classroom wall. Why doesn't somebody rip that picture down?" And then we walked past the class. I looked in at the teacher to make sure she heard everything I said. This type of garbage is tolerated. And when we're going to make heroes of criminals, what does that say about our school system? But I taught my son a lesson, to speak up and to stand up. So,
Lori, you know the irony about this whole Che Guevara. I just want to say,
Greg, I'm sorry. Think about like a series of websites that are dedicated to uploading, you know, the teachers' greatest hits, you know,
Oh,
like
yeah,
the
that would be-
craziest clips that you can find from classrooms. It'll, you know, like World Star Hip Hop. Have you ever heard about this, Lori?
Yeah.
You're familiar with that? You've seen this? World Star
They
Hip Hop
got,
is
they
a
got the
website.
libs of TikTok.
Libs of TikTok
Yeah.
or World Star Hip Hop, where they record World Star Hip Hop is all about fights, like the most brutal, disgusting fights caught on camera phone, right? And upload it, and then at the end they're like World Star. Like, people make these videos specifically to get on
it's like idiocracy, you know?
website.
Hmm.
So if we can create some kind of like game, some kind of entertainment out of catching these demonic
Catch your
teachers,
teacher. Yeah.
like in action, right? and then upload it to several websites, not just one, but several, because they'll find a way to shut it down. It has to be like, has to like move around. But so I think that could work too.
I wanted to say one quick thing about the Che Guevara phenomenon. I remember you're talking like 2006. I remember I used to be in the club scene in New York, and the Che Guevara t-shirts became like a fashion thing. People had no idea it was just some guy with a beard with a beret, and they wanted to wear the t-shirt with a guy with a beard and a beret. I used to come up to people, like these girls wearing a t-shirt. I'm like, do you know who this guy was? They're like, no, it's just a cool thing. All you got to do is tell people, hey, did you know that this guy hated gays and shot gays in the face? Tell these woke
Children, he executed children.
It's Pride Month, right? So come up to a person at a parade or whatever, one of these parades, be like, hey man, did you know that your Che Guevara hated you?
He also hated black people.
I hated black people, he hated gays.
He wanted to nuke the United States, literally.
What people don't understand is if they get what they want out of the political system, if the woke get the communism that they want, that communism will lock them up in a mental institution. People like them in the Soviet Union used to get liquidated. I call it gender fluids got liquidated. People get sent to mental hospitals. It's called psychushka. Gay person, trans, whatever, any kind of,
unless you were part of the, the high, the ruling class, you could do whatever you want in that case.
It's just, it's going to eat them. That's the irony of the whole thing. It's going to eat them. It's going to eat us.
We can't count on them realizing that. That's just like,
they don't realize they're walking around wearing a shirt that like is like somebody that's kind of like Hitler or Mao Zedong, like they don't realize that. Totally oblivious.
Yeah.
Yeah.